Wow. Nadia got the call 7:42 on Tuesday morning. Everything happens on Tuesday morning or Monday morning. She hadn't finished her coffee. She wouldn't finish it for 3 days. Felix was already at his desk, which was unusual. Felix arrived at 8:15 on good days and 8:30 on honest ones. The fact that he was there early, staring at his screen without blinking, told Nadia everything she needed to know before he said a word. "We have a problem," Felix said. "Someone clicked something. 4 words. The entire data privacy crisis that would consume the next 72 hours. The scramble, the phone calls, and the conversations with lawyers. The sleepless night where Nadia sat at her kitchen table reading a compliance statute she should have read 6 months earlier. All of it traced back to one staff member, one email, and one click. What Nadia didn't know yet was that the click wasn't the failure. The click was a symptom. The failure had been building for 2 years, quietly in the gap between we have a policy and we have a practice. And that gap was about to cost them everything they hadn't prepared for. Most data breaches in healthcare don't come from hackers. They don't come from sophisticated cyber attacks or state-sponsored intrusions. They come from a staff member who, clicking the wrong link, sharing a password, or accessing a record when they shouldn't. Human error, the number one breach vector year after year, and the one that every clinic believes won't happen to them until the Tuesday morning phone call. Hour 1. Felix traced the click, a phishing email disguised as a password reset from the EHR vendor. It arrived at 4:47 p.m. the previous day. End of shift, when attention is lowest and inboxes are being cleared on autopilot. A medical assistant clicked the link, entered her credentials, and went home. Between 4:47 p.m. and 7:30 the next morning, whoever was on the other end of that link had access to the system using valid credentials. How much did they see? Nadia asked. Felix pulled the access logs. The answer was potentially everything. The medical assistant's login had access to patient records, scheduling data, billing information, and insurance details. Because nobody had configured the role-based access controls, every clinical staff member had the same permission level. The front desk could see surgical notes. The billing team could see psychiatric records. The medical assistant who clicked the link had access to data she'd never once needed to open. And now, so did whoever had her password. Nadia asked a question she already knew the answer to. Do we have a breach response protocol? Felix opened a drawer. He pulled out a folder labeled IT policies. Inside was a 2-page document from 2021 that mentioned incident response in one paragraph, without specifying who to call, what to contain, how to notify, and what to document. It was a policy that, in the way that a sketch on a napkin is an architectural plan. Technically, it existed, but nobody could build anything with it. We have a policy, Felix said. He paused. We don't have a practice. We have a policy is not the same as we have a practice. Policies live in folders. Practices live in behavior, and behavior is shaped by training, not documents. Hour 12, Nadia had called the clinic's attorney, who asked 3 questions. Had they contained the breach? Had they begun root cause analysis? Had they notified the relevant authorities? The answer to all 3 was, we're working on it, which was the polite version of no. The attorney explained what Nadia was only now learning in real time. Breach response is not optional. Immediate containment, root cause analysis, notification protocols, and remediation plans are baseline requirements, not best practices, not recommendations, requirements. And the speed of the response in the first 24 to 72 hours isn't just a communication matter, it's a compliance matter. The clock had been running since 4:47 p.m. yesterday, and they were already behind. Dr. Mina arrived at 9 a.m. and found Nadia in the conference room with printouts covering the table. He'd seen Nadia stressed before. He'd never seen her scared. How bad? He asked. We don't know yet. That's the problem. She set down the access logs. We can't tell what was viewed because our audit trail only records logins, not which records were opened. We can't tell what was copied because we don't have data loss prevention. We can't tell how many patients were affected because we don't have a data map that shows where patient information lives across our systems. Dr. Mina sat down slowly. I thought we were compliant. We thought we were a lot of things. Hour 36. Felix had reset every password in the system, revoked the compromised credential, and patched the vulnerability that the phishing email had exploited. The containment was messy but functional. What wasn't functional was everything that should have existed before the breach. Nadia made a list, not of what went wrong, that list was already long enough. A list of what should have been in place, consent documentations. Patients must understand and authorize how their data is used, and that consent must be documented and revocable. The clinic had a consent form. It was buried on page 4 of the intake packet in language no patient had ever read and no staff member had ever explained. Doris, the front desk person who saw everything and was consulted about nothing, Doris had been handing patients that form for 3 years. She'd watched them skip to the signature line without reading a word. She'd never told them what the form meant or why it mattered. They redesigned the intake form without asking me, Doris said later. I could have told them nobody reads page 4. I would have if they asked. Access controls. Role-based permissions, ensuring staff only accesses necessary data for their specific function is important. The clinic had none. Everyone could see everything. Not by design, by default. The system shipped with open permissions, and nobody had configured restrictions because nobody had been assigned to configure restrictions. Staff, there were no phishing simulations, no password hygiene reviews, no role-specific guidance on what data each position should and shouldn't access. Nadia looked at the list and understood something she wished she'd understood 2 years earlier. The breach didn't create the vulnerability. The breach revealed it. The vulnerability had been there all along. In open permissions, the absent training, the consent form nobody read, the response plan that existed as 2 paragraphs in a folder nobody opened. Hour 70. The clinic's attorney had drafted the notification letters. Felix had rebuilt the access architecture with role-based permissions, a project that took him 3 days and should have been done at implementation. Nadia scheduled compliance training for every staff member, staggered across 2 weeks so the clinic could stay open. Dr. Mina approved the budget for all of it without argument. He signed the check with the expression of a man paying for a repair he could have prevented with maintenance. How much would this have cost if we'd done it before? He asked. Nadia had run the numbers. The preventative work, access controls, training program, breach response protocols, consent workflow redesign would have cost roughly a quarter of what that breach response was costing them now. And that didn't include the reputational damage, the patient trust erosion, or the 3 patients who called to ask whether they should find another provider. Data privacy is a patient trust issue before it's a legal one. Patients who don't trust your clinic with their data will not return, and they don't refer. They don't tell you either. Doris watched 2 of those patients leave. She'd known them for years. She'd remembered their kids' names, asked about their vacations, navigated their insurance nightmares with patience and sticky notes. They didn't leave angry, they left uncertain. And uncertainty in healthcare is the thing that drives people out the door more quietly and more permanently than anger ever does. A clinic without a documented breach response protocol isn't just non-compliant, it's operationally vulnerable because a breach without a plan becomes a crisis without a map. 6 weeks later, Nadia sat in the conference room with a different set of printouts. The new access controls were live. The training program was running monthly, road-based with phishing simulations that Felix had built and privately enjoyed a little too much. The consent workflow had been redesigned with Doris's input this time. Clear language. Second page, explain verbally at check-in. The breach response protocol was 12 pages, tested in a tabletop exercise and posted in every department. It was glamorous. It was a binder, a training calendar, a set of permissions that should have been configured on day one. Nadia finished her coffee. She didn't relax. She'd learned that compliance isn't a destination, it's a rhythm. Training cycles, access reviews, updated protocols, simulated breaches. The work doesn't end because the crisis passed. The work continues because the next click is always an email away. But now there's a map and a plan and a practice, not just a policy in a folder that nobody opens. If your clinic's data protection plan is a document from years ago that nobody has read, the question isn't whether you will have a breach, it's whether you'll know what to do in the first 72 hours. Because those 72 hours are a difference between a manageable incident and a crisis that costs you patience, trust, and the reputation you spent years building and fines.